Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills, whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organizations. Each and every episode, we sit down with experts from various fields from around the world, just like you're grabbing a coffee with them, to dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So go grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Well, how do you live a life that's not just successful, but actually remarkable? Well, that's part of the question we're going to unpack today. Well, I'm Jason Raitz, your host. This is the podcast where we believe great leaders don't just speak, but they connect, inspire, and lead through healthy communication. Today, we're learning from one of the very best. Just an absolute honor to have Guy Kawasaki on the podcast, chief evangelist at Canva, host of the Remarkable People podcast, author of the brand new book, Wiser Guy. Guy spent decades shaping culture at companies, and you probably already know some of those companies, but together we're going to learn from a really remarkable leader and human being. Together we're going to explore how we can lead with empathy, clarity, purpose, and how to live a remarkable life. Guy, welcome to the Speak with People podcast.
Well, thank you very much. I like that intro. I mean, I may have to copy that intro and give it to everybody else who interviews me. Yeah.
Wonderful. We'll send you the reel. I love it. Well, hey, before we go into the conversation, could you give us a little bit of your story, who you are, what you do, what's got you to this place?
How far back do you want me to go?
Wherever you love to start, I would love it.
All right, so let's start. I am from Honolulu, Hawaii, and I'll start in the 6th grade, but don't worry, this is going to take about 120 seconds.
Okay.
So in the 6th grade, this teacher told my parents to get me out of the Hawaii public school system and put me into a private school because I had potential to go to college. Luckily, that teacher told my parents that. Luckily, my parents listened to her. Luckily, my parents made that sacrifice. So I went to this college prep school. That led me to get into Stanford. And for the life of me, I don't know how I got into Stanford. So freaking old that back then, Japanese Americans were considered oppressed minorities. How times have changed. And so I went to Stanford and I met the person who eventually got me a job at the Macintosh division of Apple. His name is Mike Boych. And the reason why we became friends is not because we both had a desire to change the world and end poverty or increase, literacy or clean water. The reason why we became friends is because we both love cars. So that's lesson number one. It doesn't matter what motivates you. It just matters that you are motivated because we both love cars. And so we decided to work hard and study hard. Anyway. So after Stanford, I went to law school because I'm an Asian American. It's the mid 1970s, and Asian American parents wanted their kids to be doctors, lawyers, or dentists. I fainted in the Stanford Medical School in pre-med class. I figured, guy ain't going to be a doctor. And then I thought, wow, I read this article that dentists have the highest level of suicides. It's okay, that takes out dentistry. That leaves law. So I went to law school for a grand total of 2 weeks and I couldn't stand it. I hated it. I don't know. I just could not deal with it. But I got to tell you, I only went to law school for 2 weeks, but I know what the writ of habeas corpus is, which is more than some cabinet level officials, but that's a different discussion. So I dropped out of law school. I eventually came back to LA. I started to get an MBA at UCLA, which is a 40-week program. So on the 5th day, I started working for this jewelry manufacturer where I truly learned how to sell. Fast forward, my friend from Stanford recruited me. And what is ringing? Do you hear something ringing?
I do not.
Okay, well then let's all that matters is if you hear it. So anyway, Anyway, I decided that I love tech. I got an Apple II, and Apple II changed my life. If you were using an IBM Selectric typewriter with whiteout, now you have word processing, spreadsheet, and database. I fell in love with Apple II. And then my friend from Stanford, snuck me in one day to the Macintosh division and showed me a Macintosh, and I saw Mac Paint and Mac Write. And it was a freaking religious experience coming from a character generated world. And you see Mac Paint and Mac Write, it's like, oh my God. I mean, how can you do this with a computer? So eventually I became Apple's second software evangelist, and my job was to convince people to write Macintosh software and hardware. I stayed at Apple for about 4 years. Then I left to start a Macintosh software company. I did that. I came back to Apple as an Apple fellow and chief evangelist. I left that. I started writing and speaking and doing all these things. And today in 2025, I am the chief evangelist of Canva, which I hope all of you use for your graphics. I am the host of the Remarkable People podcast. And that's about it. So that's
And
an introduction to my life.
I love it. And what I love is right before this interview, you were just surfing.
I, I I I just got in from surfing, and as soon as this ends, I'm going back out surfing. So yeah,
I
so
love it.
there's three things in my life: there's surfing, podcasting, and Canva. Not necessarily in that order. Oh, it depends who's asking, actually.
Right. Well, I feel like some days I live on Canva. It is when my 21-year-old who does all of our graphics and editing for the podcast and the business, when he can't do something, I go right to Canva because it's scary how easy and amazing you
Yeah,
can make anything now.
Canva it really is an empowering technology that it truly has democratized design, and yeah, it really has made a difference in the world. Well, so did Macintosh, right? So
Sure, sure, absolutely. You said something earlier in your story about, obviously you grew up as an Asian American. Years ago, I spent lots of years speaking for students, so public schools and camps and conferences. And I remember doing I can't remember what kind of, it was a family camp once for a Chinese community. And the adults would have kind of their rally sessions and then the students. And so they brought me in to speak to the students. And so I remember speaking with the students, and student after student tell me their story, and just what you kind of alluded to and talked about, just the extreme pressure. One student wasn't allowed to play the guitar because the guitar was looked at as, an inferior instrument compared to violin or piano. So it was just amazing. And now
I
fast forward, our
I
family's
hope that
adopted.
I
What's
hope
that?
that wasn't Yo Ma.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And fast forward now, our family's adopted a little boy from China. Of course, he's 11 now. But so we've, kind of dipped into both, but it was just kind of fascinating hearing
Yeah,
hearing
we
your
have two
story.
adopted kids too. Adoption is a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
that's amazing. I love that. It's incredible. So tell us what it means to be the chief evangelist.
Well, evangelism comes from a Greek word that means bringing the good news. So, what an evangelist does is bring the good news. I brought the good news of Macintosh, how it make people more creative and productive. I'm bringing the good news of Canva, how it makes you a better communicator because we've made design accessible to anyone. So an evangelist brings the good news, and people always ask me what's the key to evangelism, and I tell them it's called Guy's golden touch. And Guy's golden touch is not whatever I touch turns to gold. I wish that was true. Guy's golden touch is whatever is gold Guy touches.
Hmm.
That's the key to evangelism. It's very easy to evangelize something great. It's very hard to evangelize crap. Trust me, I've tried.
Wow. Wow, that's powerful. Uh, so you've worked with and been around an amazing amount of founders, inventors, creators, everyone has a different communication style. And so, there's lots of stories out there about Steve Jobs, how he communicated, and different founders. Have you found that there is a pattern in each of those type of leaders when it comes to their communication? Are they all
Well,
hard driven, and are
well, I
some more empathetic in their communication? I'd just be curious, just because you have such a broad knowledge level of working around
well,
amazing leaders.
now, just to be clear, you're asking me for the commonality, which is a different question than best practice. So, do you want to know the best practice or the commonality? Because the commonality is mediocrity. And I don't think that's the answer you're looking for, right?
I love that. Let's go with the best practices then.
Okay, so best practice. First of all, less is more. And that is particularly true with executive communication. Now, I'm not saying you should be vague and you should be uncertain. I'm just saying that, when you create your presentation, you create your slides, you create your speech, there's such a temptation to try to hit all the key points. And quite frankly, you'll be lucky to get one point across and memorized or remembered from a presentation. So that's one of the beauties of Steve Jobs. He cut it down to the bone, exactly. These are the things. I use a top 10 format. And I think that, the human mind can handle about 10 topics in an hour. But if you look at some people's presentations, it's like all over the map, and they're trying to, I'll give you a metaphor. So many companies, they try to create a mission statement for the company, right? And they take their executives offside and they get a meeting facilitator, and there's 25 people in the room, and they have this 2 day offsite, and they're all pissed off because they're like wasting their time, and they're doing these cross-functional team exercises where they break into cross-functional groups, and then they say, okay, so one of you come to the front, hold out your arms, shut your eyes, and fall backwards into the hands of your colleagues at the company, so you learn trust. Anyway, after 1 day of this madness, now you're creating the mission statement, and the mission statement, there's 25 of you in the room. You're each of you have figured out that you just wasted 2 days of your life that you're never going to get back. So you figure you ought to at least get one word into the mission statement. So now the mission statement is going to be 25 words long, and it's going to be something like, we endeavor to exceed the expectations of our customers while enabling our employees to self-actualize their goals, while providing a meaningful return to our shareholders, while killing as few dolphins as possible. And I would say that is the antithesis of how an executive should communicate. I think you should limit yourself to 3 words. What does this organization stand for? If you're let's say you're a camera company. Well, I could break down a camera company into a 2 word mantra. What you should do, you're in the business of preserving memories.
Mm.
2 words. If somebody asked me, so Guy, what's your mantra? Why do you exist, Guy? I would do it in 2 words too. I would say it's empower people.
Mm.
Another 2 words, democratize design. So practice number 1 is less is more. I would say practice number 2 is that a demo is worth 1,000 slides. So as a CEO or CXO, I think that you must be able to demo your product or your service. And if you are so clueless as you cannot do that, and you have to call up a product manager or some other person to do that, I think it shows to the community and to the employees that you're like this hands-off kind of person. You don't really get your hands dirty. You don't really know how to use the equipment, or you don't really know how to use the product, and you're just like some bullshit MBA. And so if you just did Jeff, you just did these 2 things. I'll give you one more very tactical and practical tip. If you look at your presentation and you have any text in less than 60 points, you're mediocre. Like Steve Jobs used 120 point font. Now, you're not Steve Jobs. I'm not Steve Jobs. So I'm not suggesting you use 120 point font. I'm suggesting, however, you use a 60 point font. But most of you are using a 10 point font, and you're using a 10 point font with a stacked bar chart. And people see your presentation and they're looking at that stack bar chart and saying, what is the magenta one versus the pink one versus the green one versus the yellow one versus the taupe one? Like, what is this stack bar chart trying to say? You're mediocre. You're mediocre. Just slit your wrist. Get it over with.
Mm. Boy, that's powerful. I was thinking about, well, it's so tough. I mean, as a communicator for years, and I now help coach other communicators, like our content's our baby. So it's like, you know, so often when you're coached, you get done with you should present it to them and they say, now cut it in half. And you're like, oh, but I mean, you're just,
Well,
you hit it.
cut it in half is being overly kind and generous.
Mm. See, that's good. Like,
I mean, seriously, if everybody took their presentation, uploaded it to ChatGPT, and said, change the font to 60 points, give me the PowerPoint back, change it to 60 points, and reduce every slide to the bare essence. I think that's a very good start. ChatGPT would probably do a very good job.
wow. Wow. Wow.
I dare you listeners to try that.
Well, I'm going to take the dare because I have a presentation for a bank keynote in a few weeks, and I've been working on it. And now I'm going to try to be brave and do exactly what you just talked about.
You should post the before and after.
Hey,
You know what you can do? Hey, you can do before, you can do after, and then you can send me the before and let Guy take a whack at it. So you just have Chat GPT, Kawasaki GPT, and what I started with.
Yeah, I was looking at my shelves earlier, and I don't have the book jacket on it, but this is your book, Reality Check. And I've gone back and forth to this thing so much over the years. I haven't been able to read your newest book, and been waiting on Amazon. But yeah, I've heard you on your podcast. You talk about, your mission. You just talked about it, but you want to help get people's stories out there, make them remarkable. And so what is, being remarkable look like in, an everyday leader's life?
Well, I think being remarkable is, it's kind of like pornography. You're going to find this hard to believe, but it's kind of like pornography in the sense it's hard to define pornography. It's not just, do you show a breast? Do you show a penis? I mean, is that pornography? The real test, as Justice Brandeis said, pornography is, you know it when you see it. And I think the same thing is true about a remarkable leader. There are many ways to be remarkable. Steve Jobs was remarkable in a very unique way. I'm not suggesting everybody become, little Steve Jobs, but it is about really making the world a better place. And I think I would divide a life into 3 sections, which is first you learn, then you earn, and then you return. And if you really want to be remarkable, you start returning. Now, having said that, I got to tell you, from the outside looking in, if you just look at mass media and, news, you have to say that many of the billionaires and successful people of tech, their strategy seems to be first we learn, then we earn, then we burn. And burn means, you burn down stuff you don't like, you burn people you don't like, your whole reason to live is to establish lower long-term capital gains tax, and you want to make crypto successful, and then you want to burn your earnings by having $50 million weddings in Italy. You want a 300-foot yacht. You want to buy the island of Kauai. And, I do not get that.
Mm.
I think at the end of your life, you want to be able to say that you made the world a better place, not that you had the biggest yacht.
Wow. Profound. About 15 years ago, I was walking the streets in the DR, and we were working with an orphanage. And, I thought to myself, wow, this level of poverty, we just don't see. I mean, I grew up in Detroit. My parents didn't really have much. And, just trying to figure that out. And I remember being in the DR, flying home and listening to someone, different people speak about their experience. And uh, it, for most of my life, I've either put people's communication in that, okay, they speak with each other or they speak at them. And it's curious, you just brought that up, because sometimes I think the assumption as we look from the outside to all of these quote unquote successful leaders is that you have to speak forcefully and you have to talk down at people and you have to tell them that they're better than everyone else. And
Uh,
I love what you just defined for us
I
because it
I
just,
think that is, anybody who believes that, you're freaking deluding yourself. I mean, yeah, I guess if you look at, all these tech bros, you might think that that's true. But, when you see something like that, you should always ask yourself what's missing.
mm,
And here's what I mean. So, when you see these tech bros and they're all, I don't know, they're at the inauguration, they all have their yachts, they all have their islands, they all have their private jets, they're all laying off people, their employees are making 1/600th of what they are. And so you look at those examples and you say, wow, that's the way to be successful. I got to be this rich asshole. Well, you should ask yourself what's missing. And
mm,
what's missing is that there are a lot of assholes who are not rich. So that's number one. Just because you're an asshole doesn't mean you're going to be rich. And just
true.
because you're rich doesn't mean you have to be an asshole. So that's another thing. What's missing? Are there people who are nice and rich? There are.
Mm,
And the other thing you have to look at is, is this causation or correlation, which is by being an asshole, I became successful, or I became successful so people put up with my assholeness.
mm.
That's a very deep philosophical question you have to ask us. I don't know the answer to that. I told myself that I will limit my net worth to $1 billion because I don't ever want to be one of those assholes. Right now, I'm not too worried about hitting that limit. So I got plenty of room. It's a high
Yes.
quality problem.
Yes. And we have 5 kids. And so we're pretty behind as well. So,
Wow, that's 200 million each.
that's absolutely incredible. I was listening to one of your podcasts recently, and you were talking about the books that you've written. I think the numbers in the high teens.
Yeah,
Uh, as you write a
I don't
book,
remember.
and one of the reasons I can't wait to get your newest book, because I love how you've kind of put the thoughts about all of these great interviews you've done with people and these
Yeah.
conversations that are so, like, I love the Keith Ferrazzi conversation. And, you've had so many great, leaders on as you've talked about this. As you write a book, as you interview, as you get to provide resources for leaders, what goes into that for you? How do you prepare to be able to present, what I would say
Um,
are, these amazing, pieces of content and resources that help leaders?
you know, um, this is going to sound, at the very least, immodest, if not arrogant. But there are many people who have told me that you really are a great interviewer. You ask questions that nobody else would come up with. You ask questions that nobody else would have the balls to ask, and all that. And and like I've asked people to try to come up with questions for me, for my guests and all that. And I've asked ChatGPT can't even come close. And I don't I don't, some people can, call the future. Some people can dunk a basketball. I'm like Caitlin Clark can do stuff I cannot do. I, I, for some reason, I have the ability to come up with questions. And I cannot explain why. I cannot explain why.
And has that been, does that go way back? Is that just one of those things even as a kid? Or is that, do you think that was something that was
Oh,
learned?
could you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, your the ability to ask great questions, to come up with those questions. Do you think that was a learned trait? Did parents model it? Did mentors model it?
No, no. I think, I think there's two factors going on in my brain. One is that I am OCD. I mean that in the most positive way. So I am very detail oriented. So that's number one. And number two, I think that I can be a good podcaster host because I am 71 years old, so I have been through a lot. I've been on the front line a lot. I've seen a lot of bullshit go down. I've seen a lot of success. So, I have a context in which I can ask someone a question that someone who is 25 probably cannot because they just haven't been through that experience. I'm
Sure.
not claiming I'm smarter than that 25-year-old person. I'm claiming that I have more in my SSD than that person has on their SSD. Their SSD may be larger, their chip may be faster, but I have a lot of stuff in my SSD and I have a chip just fast enough to access my SSD to
Wow.
use to use a nerdy metaphor.
I no, I love that. As you've talked about, we've talked about ChatGPT a little bit. We talked about, some of the younger generation. As you look forward, do you fear for the younger generations and how advancing technology is? Do you get excited for them because it just seems like every other day it's, ramping up so fast? If you could put
Yeah.
on your futurist hat for a second, what do you see for those
Well,
younger leaders?
I wish I was 25. I mean, I think AI is the biggest deal that I've ever seen in my career. It blows away the internet, blows away social media, blows away personal computing. I think the ramifications of AI are just astounding. And if you're a young person, listen to this. You listen. You may have this paranoid fear that AI is gonna take your job or prevent you from getting a job. Well, yeah, I mean that could happen, but you sitting around worrying about it is not going to prevent it. That horse is out of the barn, and that horse is frolicking on the plains, procreating. You ain't going to put that horse back in the barn. So knowing that horse is out of the barn, you have to prepare yourself for this world. So I'm telling you, man, you are not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced by someone who can use AI better than you. So what you need to do is be the person who knows how to use AI better than the other people.
Wow. Wow. That's powerful. My 21-year-old, he'll put in a video of his golf swing and he'll say, I need help correcting this. He'll start his day off with ChatGPT. I want to be the most productive I can today. And I said that recently at a training event where the room was mainly 40, 50, 60-year-olds, and they laughed. And I said, room,
What?
like, you've got to lean into this because
What? Wait,
it's going to pass you
why?
by.
Why do you think they laughed?
That's a good question. Here's my overall thought. I think especially Gen X, maybe and boomers, I think we collectively do a decent job of looking down at younger millennials, Gen X, with our, and we all get it. You know,
Every generation does that.
every
Yeah.
generation does it. We walk to school. This generation would never be able. And I don't think my generation could have handled the amount of information and knowledge and technology that Gen Z has absorbed. So I think it was just sort of ingrained in them that you know, they just have a little, heads up on them, which just needs to change.
Um, uh, I think that, well, I think there's a tendency for every generation to say that, you know, the good old days were better than today. And, back then we used to sit around the dining table and have these deep philosophical discussions. And then we went into the family room and we played board games, and nobody was looking at their cell phone. Nobody was worried about TikTok or Instagram. And, things were so much better then. I think that is retroactive thinking and retroactive, glomming over a lot of negativity that, I think life is much better than it was back then. And I don't know. I never played board games with my parents. um, so now, I mean, yeah, I guess you could say, well, they have so much more information than before, but my parents probably said that, that, oh my God, my son has so much more information because now there's a library, right? And then somebody else said, oh my God, my kids have much more information because now there's an internet. And now we're saying my kids have so much more information because there's AI. Funny, but I think, I don't know if this is neurophysiologically correct, but I kind of doubt that we're using 99% of our brain power and we're at the limit. I probably think it's a lot more capacity that we can use. So I'm not too worried.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Um, Pivoting just a little bit, I was looking at your journey and reading through your story more and hearing your story. You've kind of reinvented yourself. You've continued to, yeah, this phrase is probably so old, but on the cutting edge. I mean, you've just continued to, your name just evokes like, wow, he's been the evangelist of all of these incredible brands. How do leaders who maybe feel stuck at where they're at, continue to move forward, embrace reinventing themselves, and not giving up? Just would love
Well,
your heart on that.
well, I don't want people to think that I don't even consider myself especially, intellectually, IQ wise smart. I just have a very deep curiosity. And so I'm very curious about things, how they work. And I am very practical. So, I cannot explain it. It's just, some people can paint, some people can surf, some people can sing. I can ask questions.
Love that.
I would say that that's right above singing as a monetizable skill. But anyway, that's just what I do. I don't know. That's how my brain was formed. I cannot tell you I know why. I cannot tell you how to repeat that if you find this desirable. Yeah.
No, I love it. Are we? Do you think we're close to the day and age where you'll be able to think what you want to text or think the design that you want to make in Canva, and your device will start to make it? Are we,
You
or is
you,
that
you
path
mean
not even going to be close?
you mean just like reading my brain waves, not
Yes.
talking or texting?
Yes.
Well, if it was up to Elon Musk, there would be a chip in my head from his company, right? But I got to tell you, of all the people in the world, Elon Musk is the last person I would let put anything into my body.
Mm.
I I don't really. I mean, I guess it's possible, but I don't think that the gating item is the ability to get it from my brain to the device. I think the gating item is getting my brain to think of something like that, right? So once
Wow.
I think of something like that, the last second problem as opposed to the last mile problem is, okay, so I'm thought of this, and now I can open up the chat GPT microphone, or I can type it in. I would say that is not the gating item. That's not the gating. I mean, I suppose, but yeah, that's not the gating item for me.
Okay. I love that. This may be a very unfair question. You've had 250 plus guests on the podcast. Is there an episode or two that really stands out that just, moved you in such a way that, there's still that memory lodged?
Well, I've had Jane Goodall on
Yeah.
more than once, and I would say that, Jane Goodall is probably the most remarkable person alive today.
Mm.
So the Jane Goodall episodes, it's funny, and this is literally a true story. It's funny, but Madison Neismer, the co-producer, and she listens to every podcast in real time, and then she edits it. So she probably listens to every podcast 3 or 4 times. And um, at the end of every podcast, almost every podcast, I say to her, "Wow, that came out much better than I thought." I mean, really good podcasters, Madison. And uh, it some of it is that we've been very fortunate with the guests we've had. Some of it is that, knock on wood, Guy can come up with great questions. Um, but for one very practical reason, I think that having a podcast is delaying dementia for me,
Mm.
because you know I mean, the nature of my life is I have 52 episodes. So, week I gotta on one week I have to understand, when you have a spinal injury and you're paralyzed, what does it take to rebuild those nerve
Wow.
endings? The next week I have to understand, what it takes to make Asian fusion food. The next week I have to understand how to be an NFL safety. The next week I have to understand, how to be a Margaret Atwood and write a dystopian novel. The next week I need to understand, what's going on with perimenopause. And, so it's like, it's not like I can get in a rut. So I think it's delaying dementia for me.
I love it. Conversations have just this amazing ability to create moments in our lives that could be like, so pivotal moments. And someone asked me once, why do you, you're not Joe Rogan, so you don't have, hundreds of millions of downloads. And I said, that's true. But every week I get to interview leaders from around the world. I'm interviewing you. This week I interviewed a leader from Australia, and last week it was South America, and just different perspectives than I ever would have thought of. And those conversations have the opportunity to, bring transformation. And,
Yeah,
for me, that's
absolutely,
just been so
absolutely.
powerful.
I don't know about you, but I think that my podcast is the best work that I've ever done in my
Mm.
career. And I could only do my podcast at the end of my career, because prior to the end of my career, I really didn't have the context to come up with these questions. But
Mm.
now that I've been through all this stuff, I can come up with much better, questions. So I think my podcast is my best work. It's
Wow.
probably also my least appreciated work, but you know, um,
Yes.
maybe after I die, my podcast will be recognized for what it is.
Well, let me ask you one last question as we're kind of rounding the corner. all that you've learned over the years, working for great companies, leading, is there a communication principle? We've talked about some great ones already, but is there just a communication principle that you would really, especially when it comes to, how they communicate, their presence, as they're day to day with their teams? Is there just something that you would, leave them with, as a
Well,
charge or an
well,
encouragement for how they
well, we
communicate?
we kind of touched that, and I said, less is more. I also said that, use a bigger font. I'll tell you one more thing you could do. I read this. Oh, where did I read this? One of the problems with interviewing 52 people a year is you forget where you heard this great idea. But this is the great idea. The great idea is, as a leader, you should try this. So as a leader, you go up and you make a presentation, you do your communications or whatever. And then you say everybody has to submit questions on a piece of paper and do not identify yourself.
Mm.
So this way, the leader gets 50, 75 pieces of questions. And I think the leader can look at those and, like, if everybody's saying, you know, we don't understand the goal. You said it's, short-term profitability, and you also said long-term growth. And, like, those two things are maybe mutually exclusive. So how can we be profitable, but then ensure our long-term viability? You need to clarify that. And if 10 people out of 50 ask that question, well, if, as my mother once told me, if 10 people tell you you're drunk, you catch a cab. You don't argue that you're not drunk. So I think that would be a very good exercise, is to require everybody to submit questions on paper so that they don't ramble on. And also, you don't have to stand up and, kind of make an ass of yourself or draw attention to yourself. So the leader won't know who wrote the question. The leader will just know that somebody out there doesn't understand something, and that's what I ought to cover. I think that is a great idea.
Oof, that's powerful. I love that. We're building this online library of sorts. It's a spreadsheet, but we ask all of our guests, for different resources they love, and so it's a place where our listeners can go. Is there a speaker that every time you hear them, you just can't believe at how well they communicate? You can't wait to tell somebody about them. Somebody you highly recommend.
Yeah, Joe Rogan. No, I'm just kidding. Pete Hegseth. No, I'm just kidding. um, Well, you posed the question as a speaker, but how about as someone's body of knowledge that I recommend? Not necessarily a speaker, someone who has written books or spoken or, whatever, right?
Yes.
So, okay, so this is the Guy Kawasaki list of resources for you to be a remarkable leader. First of all, you should read the book Influence by Bob Cialdini, Cildini. He is the godfather of influence. So if you want to influence people, you read Bob Cialdini's book. Number two, you want to foster a growth mindset in your company so people believe they can stretch themselves, they can do things they don't know how to do, they can grow, they can innovate. And the mother of that is Carol Dweck, Dweck. So you read her book, Mindset. Another thing is, I read a book by Brenda Ueland, Ueland. It's called If You Want to Write. And basically, it tells you that if you want to write, you should write. You should not worry about not having a PhD in English. You should not worry about not having taken a course in how to write a novel. You should not listen to doubt, particularly the doubt in your own head. You should just write. Now, many of you may not be writers, but you substitute any creative endeavor for the word write. It could be make movies. It could be a photographer. It could be an entrepreneur. It could be a leader. If you want to lead. So I recommend that. So that's three books right there. I would say all three of those books changed my life.
Mm.
And when an author tells you to read somebody else's book, that is the highest form of
You
praise.
pay attention. Let me ask you one more resource. Is there a podcast or two that you keep coming back to if you listen to podcasts, whether it's a guilty pleasure
Well,
or
you
a
know, I
development?
um, well, we're going to violate HIPAA right now, but believe it or not, I am deaf.
Hmm.
And as someone who is deaf, I very seldom listen to podcasts because I have a cochlear implant. So obviously, I can hear, but it's, let's just say that a cochlear implant takes you from being deaf to have really lousy hearing.
Hmm.
And so I cannot tell you that I look forward to audio input in podcasts or music. I can't even go to a movie anymore. So I very seldom listen to podcasts. I am mostly a reader. I also have a short attention span, and there are very few times when I can listen to something for 60 minutes. uh,
I'm with you.
so yeah, my resources are those three books, my resource recommendations.
I love that.
And
I
then
love that.
listen, I'll give you one more for
Yeah.
you. I have created my own personal LLM. It's called Kawasaki GPT.
Hmm.
And Kawasaki GPT contains all my writing, all my interviews, my transcripts, my videos, basically everything I've done. So you could go to Kawasaki GPT and you can ask me questions. And I promise you that Kawasaki GPT will give you better answers than Kawasaki in real life will. Because I know this, because when I have to write something or I have to draft something or I have to come up with a blurb or a forward or whatever, I ask myself the question on Kawasaki GPT. And then, but now to kind of maybe impugn what I just said, but I tell you something. If you went to Chat GPT and you said, what would Guy Kawasaki say is the most important components of a good pitch? Chat GPT will give you a very good answer of what I would say, arguably better than what I would say in person.
I love it. I love it. We will link to all of those and to that. Where's the best place we should send our listeners to find out more about you online?
Uh remarkablepeople.com. I mean, but honestly, remarkablepeople.com is not about Guy. It is about my guests.
Yep.
And you know, the amount of wisdom and knowledge in Guy is finite and falling. The amount of wisdom and inspiration in remarkablepeople.com is increasing to infinity and beyond. So, that is the better resource.
I love it. This has been absolutely amazing. I can't thank you enough for your generosity, responding to the email, saying yes, and taking a break during surfing and just sharing your vault of wisdom, sir. This has been absolutely incredible. Thank you for all that you do.
All righty. Um, are you gonna just do you edit or you just run it?
It just depends if we need some edits.
Okay, so I just thought of something. So when I talked about that restaurant that was vandalized, that is a real life occurrence. It's not clear to me that the owner of that restaurant would want something like that discussed online.
Yeah, we can definitely find that.
So when you find that, now I was thinking like the context was, well, it was a context where I gave an example out of left field about my OCD detail oriented brain.
Yeah.
So I think you could wipe out that whole example and not really weaken the podcast. So
Oh
if
yeah.
you'll take that out for me.
Yep. Of course.
Yeah, I don't want to create, well, people know I'm in Santa Cruz, so that kind of limits who I could be talking
Yeah.
about and
No,
all that.
that's
Yeah.
easy. Don't even think about it for a second.
Okay, thank you.
That's absolutely wonderful. Yeah, I'll find it, the timestamp, we'll edit it, and
Okay.
Easy. Not a problem
All
at all.
righty.
Been there. Sir, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Speak with People podcast. It means the world to us when you share this episode. Thanks for liking, subscribing, or following the podcast. That really does help the podcast get into more ears and into more leaders listening. Also, don't forget, we have 2 exciting resources for you. The first is go to Facebook and join the speakers group. This is a community designed for leaders who want to grow their communication skills. Also, go to speakwithpeople.com/skills library to access the Communication Skills Library. It is an online resource chock filled with resources that will inspire you and transform you and grow your communication skills. Thanks again for being a part of the listening community. We cannot wait for the next episode.